It's Johnny Ward standing in for Luke Tarr this evening, but the great man, Davy Russell, I haven't spoken to you in ages. I'm dying to know, how are you getting on and when will you be back?
Yeah, all is good now. So I'm riding out in Gordon's and everything's going according to plan. I must go meet my surgeon next week sometime, and hopefully we'll be looking at a date then.
How are you feeling?
Oh, out of my chin. Yeah, real good order now.
It looks like you're relaxing on the bed, which is a lot of. I've often done Zooms from the bed as well. Then you just look very, very comfortable there altogether.
Yes, very comfortable. I'll be able to talk all night.
Bill, the great man, is back.
Yeah, it's good to have him back. It'll be better when he's back in the saddle. I think
Absolutely,
that's what we all want to see.
Yeah, and like Davey, how tough has it been? Because lockdown is tough on us all, and obviously, if you were race riding, it wouldn't be the worst because you'd be kept going.
I know, I'm kept going anyway. I'm quite busy. 5 kids, and we have a very busy house, and we're getting into falling season and things like that. So I have the farm at home and just endless work. You can imagine it's hard enough to keep your garden tidy, but trying to keep a couple of acres tidy is very difficult. So we're trying to upgrade the whole time. But so I've been very, very busy, and it's helped my recovery as well, because I've never really stood still since the fall. I'm not very happy taking too much time off. So I'm happier when I'm working. So I've been very busy and kept going the whole way through.
Happy days, and I know the feeling. You can check out Davy's blog on the Star Sports website, where he's going to go through all the race over the 2 days. But tonight, we're going to go through the 4 Grade 1s at Leopardstown on Saturday. We're going to start, Davy, with the Novice Hurdle, the Nathaniel Lacey and Partners Lister's Novice Hurdle. I'm sure you're a big fan of Gallard de Menil, the way he did it last time. He obviously has to reverse form with Henry's, who disappointed subsequently. Statler thrown into the mix as well, the likes of Esdaile Bob, who obviously fell last time. This is a deep, deep race.
Yeah, from start to finish. Look, you can go back down there to the Martling horse at JP's and Willie Mullins, the one that Mark Walsh rides. His name escapes me at the moment, but he was very impressive. He's a point-to-point winner. He is a 7-year-old. He obviously had his setbacks, but I think the age will stand to him in this race. Look. It is the same as last year. You don't often get these Grade 1s with these amount of runners, and it's gonna take luck and running. And what I think it's going to be a split. I think the horses to the 4, if they're put under pressure early on, could suffer, and it could be made for a close, or with the likes of one of them second strings of Willie Mullins, or not second strings, but not the choice of their leading rider. And obviously JP's is no way a second string, but he is quite a big price. I'm a little bit worried about the favourite, that he's quite keen and stepping up and trip all.
For the first time.
Yeah, I've no doubt he'll stay. I don't think stamina is his problem, but it's not a small field. It's a big field. It'll take a bit of argy-bargy for you to get your position. So he'll have to be on his best behaviour and settle pretty early in this race.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that about the tactics of the race and luck and running, because you think 2 mile 6 round Leopardstown would be grand. I remember you were riding Fury Road in this race last year, and even that was a messy race as well, won by Lace Exhibition, and obviously it's going to be tactically intriguing.
Yeah, I gave Fury Road a very poor ride in that race last year, because I fell into the trap. I dropped him in, and I thought he had more pace than he actually had. So I got a bit flat-footed very early on, and I could never get into the race. It was a very, very high-quality race, as it turned out to be. Latest Exhibition and Fury Road battled out to finish in Cheltenham the couple of weeks after. Plus, you had Martin Brazel's horse, Sean Mulrine's horse. Yeah. And there was another good horse thrown in between us again. I can't remember. So that's why I'm saying
Cobbler's Way, proper race.
Yes, Cobbler's Way. Yeah, so that's why I'm saying that the horses I felt last year, the horses that dropped in was a good place to be. Obviously, I got that wrong, and it could be the same on Saturday, or it could work the other way. You just don't know with these high quality races.
Bill, I quite like Vanillier here, because he was staying on strongly at Limerick, and I actually think this is going to take a bit of getting. We've had a lot of rain in Dublin the last sort of week or so now. I've called Leopardstown wrong many times, because it dries so kind of, it dries so markedly quite quickly. But I think this will be a testing enough card. What do you make of the race?
Yeah, well, they're saying there's heavy bits already and there's more rain due. So I think you've got to factor in. I thought this was actually the race of the 2 days. I thought this was the most wide open, fascinating of all the Grade Ones. I think it's a brilliant race. From a betting point of view, I think you have to take the favourite on. It's not been a great race for favourites, this race in the past. I mean, we mentioned Fury Road, but Relegate got beaten as a favourite the time before, and I remember when Tower Bridge won it, there was
absolute boil over. Yeah,
you just get the odd funny result. There were a couple of horses I thought would run well. I was impressed with Cape Gentleman when he won. I thought he could go really well. I thought 13-2, 7-1 about him was interesting. And the other one was Mouse Morris's horse, Gentleman's Game, the grey horse, who looks on paper he's a double figure price, but he won really well. The stable are in great form. I would definitely take those two against the kind of Mullins hot pots. Davy hit the nail on the head. This is the kind of race that Willie wins with a second or third or fourth string. I wouldn't be in a hurry to take too short a price about Galliard Domenial, even though he ticks every box.
Would you take a short price about Shakin Pursuan, the Dublin Chase, 2-5 with Star Sports?
Me?
Yes.
Do you know what? I think, well, obviously they finished 1-2 last year, Shakin Pursuan and Min. And the likely scenario is they'll finish 1-2 again. Shakin Pursuan will probably win and Min will finish second. We all know that, the bookmakers know that, and it's priced up accordingly. And I was a bit surprised there was such a gap in the betting between the two. You're talking nearly 2-5 Shakin Pursuan and 9-2, 5-1 Min. And the ground is going to be worse than last year, I believe. And Davy, correct me if I'm wrong. And there was a moment where Min and his stamina was beginning to make a bit more of a race of it last year until Shakin Pursuan pulled away. I think Shakin Pursuan will beat Min, but I think it will be a lot closer and a lot tighter. I think it'll be a tougher test.
He's an absolutely spectacular jumper, Davy. And I think there was a jockey cam on Sean Flanagan riding Put the Kettle On at Christmas. And you could even see from his perspective how ridiculous this lad's jumping was, even relative to Notebook. Am I right in saying, though, that he might have one kink, which is that he doesn't actually finish his races overly strongly? He's just so good that he gets home, or is he flawless?
It's very hard to weigh him up because we haven't really seen him being challenged late on in a race. But to the naked eye, it seems that in the last 100 yards, they seem to be his weakest. So there's a lot of things to take in consideration here. So they've moved the last fence back towards the bend. So you're going to have a huge run-in from the back to the last, which is not ideal for Shakin Pursuan. As you say, he's such a phenomenal jumper that he gains so many lengths at his fences. The further away from the line the last fence is, the more vulnerable he becomes. But he just has this way of drawing his opposition in, just killing him off one by one, and he gets a huge lead on him by the time the last comes and it's all over. You can't claw him back. Notebook has to be considered again, albeit he was behind him the last day. The track is going to suit him better. It's going to be, I won't say it can't be that narrow a track because there's a 20 runner handicap chase later on in the day, but at the same time it's going to be on the wide outside because they'll obviously need fresh ground for the second day. So it is going to be a tough task on very, very testing ground, or what seems to be very testing ground. And I agree with you, Leopardstown can dry out overnight. It's mythical, really, the way it dries out. For that reason, 2-5, it's definitely not. It's vulnerable. He's vulnerable. It could be the one day that he could be vulnerable. I just love to see him be challenged after the last. At the same time, if horses aren't able to live with him from the third last to the last, then he's just unbeatable.
That's fascinating stuff, Davy. And I think it's interesting to just point out as well, Sparkle Dadaris is 28-1 here. He was actually shorter in the bet in the Notebook at Naas, when admittedly he was just fine. The last year ran over 3 miles. Very good horse over 2 miles, and he could actually outrun his price. Now, this horse, Davy, Energumine, I'd say if you'd one ride on the day, you wouldn't give out if he were your ride in the Irish Arkle. He's been pretty spectacular so far. Hard to know what his trip is. Hard to know what his ceiling is. 8-11 favourite.
Yeah, he ticks every box. Again, a very, very competitive race. It's not just going to be a 2 or 3 runner race where you can get, you know, he wears his heart on his sleeve. He goes out, he jumps and gallops. But he's, look, to say he's going to be contested for the lead, but there's plenty of horses in the race there that either will take him on for the lead or sit very, very close to him. I just still think that Davy Star, when he gets the day that they'll go too quick, I felt maybe that he got involved in the race a little bit too early the last day. It was a very tricky race. I feel Felix Daisy comes back into it with conditions, more so in his favour. I think the ground of all the horses over Christmas, he seemed visually to dislike the going. Gordon's horses really have turned the corner since Christmas, and they're in great fettle at home. So I just wouldn't write off them. But really, visually, all the way through, I'll leave the pronunciation to you, Johnny. Willie's horse, what is it?
Energy, yeah.
Energy has been really, really impressive, and you know is very, very, and he is going to be Shiskin's biggest worry come March if he can handle the test on Saturday.
I couldn't agree more with you. What would you do with Felix Daisy if you were somehow told, Davy, get your riding boots on, this is your first ride back on Saturday?
He does like to rock and roll, Johnny. He has his own way of doing it. He seems to go through a little bit of a lull halfway through the race, but to be fair to him, he comes home really well. His jumping is fantastic, but he just likes to run. He loves soft ground. He loves jumping. So I'd hate to hinder that, you know. Not good enough. He seems to be happiest doing that, and if he's not good enough doing that, then so be it. But I feel he's the type of horse that just loves to run it. Jack gave him such a marvelous ride in Liverpool last year. Like really from the get-go, he went hammer and tongs. They took him on the whole way, and he just kept fending him off. Whether he can do that against these horses on Saturday, I'm not sure, but that is the way he likes to run.
There are a lot of angles to the race, Bill, because Blackbow's 33-1. Even though actually when they ran at Christmas, I think he was 11-4 shot and he fell, despite the fact he jumped brilliantly in his chase debut. He wasn't really put into the race last year behind Energy Mean. I think it was David Mullen's last ride. Davy Star is a 10-1 shot, even though he's obviously placed in his champion hurdle and was much shorter here the last day. Him and Felix Daisy have now clashed 3 times. They've been pretty bizarre races, all 3, but neither of them, to me, looks good enough to beat Energy Mean at the moment. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I thought Energy Mean was the best favourite on kind of display of all these races. More to do with conditions than anything else too, because I think some of his big rivals, you know, a bit of their speed, like Captain Guinness and Davy Star, a bit of their speed will be blunted, I would have thought. I'm interested what Davy said about Felix Daisy, and I could see him hitting the frame. I could see Davy Star hitting the frame, but I think Energy Mean will win. I think he's just relatively straightforward. I think he's very good. I think he's a serious threat to Shiskin too. And if he is to be a serious threat to Shiskin, he has to win here.
I can't wait for that race. And Davy, this Irish Champion Hurdle is a race to savour just on so many levels, because you can really look at it in many different ways. I want to ask you a straightforward question, yes or no. Is Abacadabras a dog?
No.
Why does he need a strong pace? Does he need nice ground? Does he need things to fall? Is he just a kind of a Hartlepool that does it on the bridle? What do you expect from him at 8-1 here?
It's a hard one to call, Johnny, and he does appreciate nicer ground. I feel that on testing conditions in a high class race, he's vulnerable. I think on good conditions in a high class race, he would be a big danger.
I know well from looking at you there, if this horse rocked up in the champion hurdle on goodish ground, you'd fancy it.
They say I'd fancy him. You see, he's copped in a rock in a hard place. He wants fast ground, which he probably will never get in a championship race, because All for the Better is just not allowed anymore, which is, I think, a good thing. He does want fast ground. He's jumping is the one thing Jack said. I spoke to Jack after the race in Leopardstown, and he said, look, he never felt like he was going. You'd have to write off that run, but he says the one huge plus you'd have to take over. He jumped fantastic. He jumped like a champion hurdler, and a lot of the time, that is the thing that lets these horses down. So he's jumping.
John Raw, for example.
Yes, he wouldn't have been quick enough at all, you know. Oh, sorry, San Roy. Yeah, he's jumping.
Yeah.
He's left him. Sure.
Yeah.
Left him down. I just feel I wouldn't. Saturday wouldn't be the be all and end all for Abercrombie. I think a nice run. He's still been have a life in Cheltenham. But again, conditions would need to be in his favour. I think. One of the best servants in the game is Petit Mouchoir. He's a fantastic horse. Change of stable. There was a couple of niggly things up with him from when his new connections bought him. I feel that he would improve dramatically from his Christmas run to here. And if you had a fancy and you're looking for something to split them, I think Petit Mouchoir could be the horse that the biggest upset could come from. Whether the filly wins or Sharjah wins, I'm not quite sure, but I do really consider Petit Mouchoir as danger. And I know you'll say he's 11 for whatever age he is, but he's a very, very tough horse.
Well, everyone assumes that he and Honeysuckle will be up there and possibly taking each other on. If you're Rachel Blackmore, this filly is probably vulnerable over 2 miles, and that's a bit of a problem. But how do you ride her?
Oh, very straightforward. She won this race last year. This race or Christmas?
Yeah, this race.
Yeah, albeit she beat Darver Star, and like this is a far, far deep renewal.
I'm not quite. I couldn't agree with you 100% there, Johnny, because she beat Darver Star fine, but Darver Star was third in the champion hurdle afterwards.
Fair enough.
So it's probably form is probably there now. You know, I wouldn't like to knock her. Everybody seems to want to knock her. And she's unbeaten, and she could remain unbeaten on Saturday. I would be very much in her corner. She's very talented. You remember last year, if she had to go down and wing the last, she'd have beat Davor Star by 5 or 6, and there probably would have been an awful decision to be made where she won the champion hurdle last year. So for their benefit, she only won that short distance because she made a little slight error at the last. They went on to Cheltenham, and like really, you'd have to say one of the races of the festival last year was the Mayor's Race, most intriguing race in all shapes and forms. So I think someone mentioned to me today that it's been quoted that if she wins on Saturday, she goes for the champion hurdle. And if she doesn't, she can also go back for the Mayor's Race. But I don't know. There's just a one little slight worry about her that we haven't seen as much as her as we have in the past. I just wonder why that is. And there's always the case that fillies, they can only take so much racing. As we saw with Apple's Jade, she was so good through her career, but really at the end of her career, she started to deteriorate.
Yeah.
And I'm just worried why we haven't seen her banging out like she has done in past seasons.
And she did look like she needed the run the last day, Bill. But you know, Henry DeBromhead talking about this mare, she's completely changed her attitude since she started to win. She knows she's very good, and she kind of just bosses races at the end. She's a brilliant finisher of her races, and seems to be kind of half doing enough. I'm not sure that'll be good enough here, though, over 2 miles. I think tactically she might be taken on. I'm very interested in Esdaile because I think he shaved way better than the Bear result the last in his first one back. What do you like?
Yeah, it's a really trappy race because when you look at the top 4, Davy was mentioning, there's niggling question marks over all of them. You've got the trip question with Honeysuckle, you've got the fact that she hasn't run as much, and you want to kind of take her on as favourite. Sharjah was brilliant last time, but the question with Sharjah is that he's kind of bombed out of this meeting before a couple of times. Wasn't great in this race last year, and wasn't great in the Novice Hurdle when he ran at the meeting and that's always in the back of your mind when you're taking a shortish price. You know, that there shouldn't be as much in the gap in the betting as there is between the two, but that worries you. Your head's turned towards Saint-Ouen because you think maybe heavy ground will help him more and he'll come back into it, but he's got to jump better, and you're starting to forgive a couple of bad runs now, and it's becoming a harder test. Abracadabras, we know, is going to be better on better ground. And then you're left with the other two on the outside, Saldier and Petit Mouchoir. It might be, you'd wish from a punting point of view there were 3 places being paid rather than 2. But, I think if you had to have a bet in this race, I'd probably play the 2 outsiders, Saldier and Petit Mouchoir. 2 horses you've covered between you well, but one being kind of 12, 14 to 1, one being 20 to 1. It wouldn't be the biggest surprise. I think the likely winner is Honeysuckle. But I don't think she's a great bet at that price because I think she's vulnerable. So if I was to bet in the races, I'd probably play small stakes, Saudi and Petit Mouchoir and hope for a boil over.
What's your strongest fancy of the 4?
Of the leading ones?
Yeah, Energumene, is this?
Over all the races. I think that the best bet on the card in terms of short one, I think, would be Energumene. I quite like taking on the ones in the first races. I think that's quite a fun play, particularly Mouse Morris's horse. But yeah, Energumene, I think, is the most likely short one.
Most bulletproof one for you, Davy, of the 4 races?
Yeah, Energumene, yeah, without doubt. I think visually and, the regard they hold him in, and his improvement out through the season. I think there's going to be improvement again from this. Again, I'd have to put in a slight worry. He has a tendency to go to his right. It won't really matter as much in Leopardstown as it would elsewhere. So for that reason, I would say Energumene.
Brilliant stuff, Davy, and brilliant stuff from Bill. Fantastic race. Forget about Cheltenham for a couple of days. Dublin Race Festival is really, really top to bottom quality stuff. Check out Davy's blog on the website, and we'll be back again tomorrow for the second day of the Dublin Race Festival with Star Sports.